Here's something that sounds completely backwards. Your emergency fund, the thing every financial expert tells you to build first, is quietly costing you money. Not a little, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. And before you close this video thinking I'm about to tell you to skip your safety net, I'm not. Emergency funds are important. What I'm actually going to show you is that almost everyone gets the size of it wrong, and that mistake has a real, calculable cost. So today, let's look at the math nobody actually walks you through. Not whether you should have an emergency fund, how much it's actually costing you to have the wrong amount sitting in it. My name is Jordan. If you've ever wondered whether your just-in-case money is actually working against you, stick around. All right, let's start with the standard advice, because you've heard it 100 times. 3 to 6 months of expenses. Sometimes people stretch that to 9, even 12 months if they're especially cautious. Sit in cash, don't touch it, sleep well at night.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Nobody ever tells you what that range actually costs you in opportunity. Because here's the thing about cash sitting in a savings account. Even a good high-yield savings account, earning somewhere around 4 to 5%, is still usually underperforming what that same money could earn if it were invested over a long period of time. And the bigger your emergency fund, the more money is sitting there earning that lower return instead of a higher one. Let's put real numbers on it. Say your monthly expenses are $4,000. The standard advice tells you to keep somewhere between $12,000 and $24,000 in your emergency fund. Let's take the middle of that range, $18,000, sitting in a high-yield savings account earning 4.5%. Now compare that to the same $18,000 invested in a diversified index fund, averaging 8% annually over, say, 20 years. In the savings account, that money grows to roughly $43,000. Invested instead, that same $18,000 grows to almost $84,000.
That's a gap of over $40,000 on money that was just sitting there, doing its job as a safety net. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Jordan, but that's the whole point of an emergency fund. It's not supposed to be invested. It's supposed to be safe and liquid. And you're completely right. That's exactly why I'm not telling you to invest your emergency fund. I'm telling you that most people's emergency fund is bigger than it actually needs to be. And the excess, the part beyond what you genuinely need in a real emergency, is where that lost growth is quietly happening. Here's the piece almost nobody calculates. The size of your emergency fund shouldn't be a flat number everyone uses. It should be based on your actual risk profile. And most people's actual risk profile requires a lot less cash than the generic advice assumes. Let's break down what actually determines how much you need.
First, job stability. If you're in a stable field with high demand, say healthcare or a government role or an in-demand technical skill, your risk of sudden, prolonged unemployment is genuinely lower than someone in a volatile, commission-based sales job or a highly cyclical industry. A stable income person holding 6 months of expenses in cash is often over-insuring against a risk that's statistically much smaller for them specifically. Second, household income sources. If you're a single-income household with dependents, your risk profile is real and higher. If you're part of a dual-income household, here's something most people don't factor in. The odds of both incomes disappearing at the same time are dramatically lower than the odds of just one disappearing. A dual-income household often needs meaningfully less emergency cash relative to their combined expenses than a single-income household does, because the built-in redundancy is already doing some of that protective work. Third, access to other liquid or semi-liquid resources. Do you have a home equity line of credit already set up? A taxable brokerage account you could access within a few days if genuinely necessary? A 0% APR credit card you could use as a bridge for a month while other funds get sorted out? These aren't ideal solutions, but they're real backup layers that reduce how much pure cash you actually need sitting idle.
Now, here's an analogy that makes this click. Think of your emergency fund like an insurance policy. Nobody buys 10 times more homeowners insurance than their house is worth, just in case. You insure against the actual risk in front of you, not an exaggerated worst case stacked on top of another worst case. Your emergency fund should work the same way, sized to your actual exposure, not to a number that sounds responsible on a checklist. So here's a more useful framework than just do 3 to 6 months automatically. Start with your bare minimum monthly expenses, not your full lifestyle spending, your actual survival number if you had to cut back hard. Multiply that by a number based on your real risk, not the generic range. If you're in a stable job, dual income household with decent backup liquidity elsewhere, 3 months of bare minimum expenses is often genuinely enough. If you're in a volatile income situation, single income, with dependents and no other liquid backup, stretching toward 9 or even 12 months makes real sense for you specifically. The number isn't wrong for everyone. It's wrong when it's applied to everyone the same way.
Let's put this into real numbers one more time. Say your actual bare minimum expenses are $2,500 a month instead of your full $4,000 lifestyle spending. And say your risk profile genuinely supports a 3-month cushion instead of 6. That's $7,500 sitting in cash instead of the generic $24,000 6-month full expense number a lot of advice would have you hold. That's a difference of over $16,000 that could be doing meaningfully more work for you elsewhere, while you're still fully covered for the actual risk in front of you. Now, I want to be careful here, because there's a version of this advice that gets misused. This is not permission to keep zero emergency fund and invest everything, hoping it works out. Markets can be down exactly when you need the money most, which forces you to sell at a loss during the worst possible timing. That's the real danger of underinsuring. The goal isn't to minimize your emergency fund. It's to right-size it based on what you'd actually need, instead of defaulting to whatever range sounds cautious.
And here's something most people don't realize about where to actually keep that right-sized fund. It doesn't all have to sit in a checking account earning nothing. A high-yield savings account, a money market fund, or short-term treasury bills can all hold your emergency cash while still earning a reasonable, safe return, often 4 to 5% right now, without sacrificing the liquidity that makes it useful in an actual emergency. So here's your starting point. Calculate your actual bare minimum monthly expenses, not your full lifestyle number. Be honest about your real job stability and household income structure. Check what other backup liquidity you already have access to, and then size your emergency fund to that specific number, not to a generic range that was never built with your situation in mind. Because the goal was never to have the biggest possible cushion. It was to have exactly enough cushion to handle a real emergency, so the rest of your money can actually go to work.
If this changed how you're thinking about the size of your own emergency fund, hit subscribe. And tell me in the comments, how many months of expenses do you currently have saved? And after this video, does that number still feel right to you?